Hello and welcome to week 22 of Building Kamino. Last week we worked on this prison section from the Bad Batch, and from that same episode of the Bad Batch today, we are moving on to the Bad Batch's quarters. Let's do it.
Move it, troopers! On the double! Fire!
Okay, so the Bad Batch's quarters, as I said, was seen in the premiere of the Bad Batch. It's basically a room within Kamino where the Bad Batch stay. It's a really interesting room to build in Kamino because compared to everything else, which is so white and clean and nice looking, this is grim and dark and dirty and there's mess everywhere and there's just random crates all over the place. So it's really nice as a contrast and I'm really excited to build it. One of the best resources I found for this room was this article by CBR.com, which basically looks at the different beds of the Bad Batch members and shows how it represents their characters and gives me really nice reference images to look at to build them. For example, you've got Wreckers here, which is just like this kind of blanket type area with a big string across the top. Tech's got some blueprints, of course, because he's technical. Crosshair's got some battle droids, because I guess it's target practice, or to maybe hint towards his dealings with the enemies. And then Hunter's just got a big skull. I'm pretty sure that Echo's just got like a hammock off to the side, because obviously the room would have been built before Echo was around, so he's just got his own random section strung off to the other side. So now's the time to make them. I'm not entirely confident that I'm going to be able to fit in all 5 of the beds here. I think I'm going to try my best to get 3 in, just because of limited space. As I said in the last episode, I'm trying to make this room as big as possible, but sometimes you can't fit everything. So let's start by putting in some flooring, shall we? Okay, so it's a little bit later and I've just put in some very simple dark bluish grey tile flooring. For some reason, not all of these lines are completely solid for some reason. You can see I've made a little bit of dents and whatnot just for some more detail and a space here to put in a table later on, and some just jumper plates for studs and minifigures, just for stuff that I need later on. But it's quite simple just because I'm trying to make this room as low to the ground as possible because the actual walls are going to be quite tall. Speaking of which, let's move on to those. Okay, so the first Bad Batch bed that we're going to be making, to me, I think is the most interesting one, that being Crosshair's one. You can see these kind of reddish battle droids drawn onto the walls. That's what I'm basically trying to recreate here with some dark orange pieces, and I think it's actually turned out really nicely. You can see here for the whole technique of this entire pod is actually really interesting. You can see there's arches and hinges going on in there. It's all nice and snot. I've got some nice greebling up the top as well. And then you can see the actual wall is connected in with these hinge-like bricks and plates using some headlight bricks. It's quite an interesting technique to say the least, and I promise you throughout this entire build or this room is some of the most intricate techniques I've ever used in a Lego mock. Like, I think in this room alone, it will beat out the entirety of Theed in terms of actual technical Lego building, which I think is quite funny. You can see the greebling on the top actually utilizes a welding torch, which is a really nice piece for some wire details. And this is what it looks like attached to the wall. It's basically held in with a bunch of headlight bricks. But anyway, time to build the door to the room. And here's the door into the Bad Batch room, another really fun build to make. Like, you can see here it's got a really nice rounded aesthetic. The back of it is a bunch of random techniques going on using some headlight bricks, which is how those hinge plates are attached. Just a really different technique, which I haven't really seen implemented before. Looking back to the actual door though, you can see I've used some masonry bricks turned around to create the actual door itself and then give it a nice little border, as well as that white light at the top, which I put on a ton of different Bad Batch rooms, and some nice steps on the front, just to round off the room. No pun intended. The next room we've got here is Wrecker's room. It's one of the lesser detailed rooms of the 4. It's got this nice little string under it, which I'm going to put some kind of cloth on, probably just some kind of minifigure cape or something like that. But you can see that it does attach to this section again, and it will fold in just like the other one, and has a bunch of different greebling on the top, like there's a control panel and some blasters and this big silver piece. And I think it looks really interesting, so when that does connect, I think it will look really cool. You can see here there's a big blue piece that's obviously not meant to be there. I just need that piece to come in from Bricklink in grey. You can see I'm going to need a couple of these in the right colours, but we'll cross that road when we come to it. But anyway, moving on to the next room. Up next, we've got the next bedroom. Now, this one isn't entirely finished yet, but I think I'm going to likely make this Tech's room, just because it looks a little bit more interesting than Hunter's one, and also because I can't find a good enough skull to use for Hunter's one. Now, this is quite an interesting one because it's actually got the outside wall built into it. Now, this is basically what you're going to see from the outside of Kamino, just looking on the outside. So I had to connect that in with even more of these hinge plates, and I'm really running out of those now, so that's not great. But yeah, I haven't built the inside wall to this yet, but I'm going to do that at some point. I just need to figure out a way to actually insert it. Like, you can kind of see, it's not quite a full brick length, so it's going to be very interesting to fit that. But there's some more greebling on top, as per usual. But let's bring all 4 sections together as what we've got so far, and I really like how this room looks. You can see with all 4 sections put together, they create a really nice look with a really interesting like wall technique with all these hinges, how they kind of just loop around all together. Now, obviously, it's not perfect, like these blue and green arches definitely need to be replaced, but I think besides that, this is still looking pretty great, and I couldn't fit quite as many in as I wanted to, but I'm still really happy with how this is quite turned out. So now to add in the little table that you saw in the Bad Batch episode in there as well. And here's what that looks like. I'm not completely happy with this. As you can see, it kind of wants to keep falling apart because it's a big snot table and it isn't held together very well. So I will have to do some reworking with this to try and make it a little bit better by next week. But I still really like how this section's turned out. Again, those arches are not perfect and I need to make an interior to that room, as well as some more general mess and kind of storage stuff just hanging around. I recently came across these stickers in some kind of police station set. I forgot which one it was. So I just bought these off of Bricklink because of these tally marks which are on them, because they look similar to the ones that Wrecker signs off in the building just to basically signal every complete mission. I tried to find a place where to use these within the mock, and it was quite hard because there isn't that much bare space wall. There is a little bit of the gap in, like, I could do it on these panels around here, or the gap in this corner over here, which is probably where I will end up doing it, just because it's got the most actual space in it, although I can't put in the full brick. So what I'm going to have to do is going to have to do some sticker surgery and cut them up and place them onto that wall, so it looks a little bit something like this. Again, it's not perfect, and I would like to have them connected in some way, and I don't want to put a sticker over multiple pieces. So I think, for the time being, this is the best it's going to be. But I don't think it looks too bad overall. It helps to add to the messy look of the room, as it should be. But the next thing I need to do is add in an actual inside to this room here. Now, this is what that looks like. I'm actually really happy with how this came out. Instead of doing the brick built method, which I did on the other 2 windows, this is actually a large plate on its side, which I've just put a bunch of tiles onto and some blueprints, which I believe came from some Ninjago sets. Obviously, they shouldn't be blue, they should just be white markings, but I couldn't do that because I didn't have the stickers for it. So I think these blue ones do suffice quite well, and they'll look better when the rest of the walls around them are the grey, because they'll pop out slightly more than they do currently. But I like how that looks. I think it works really nicely. One final little thing I added was this little blanket over that like string section that Wrecker has. But besides that, there you have it for this week's episode of Building Kamino. I didn't quite finish this room. Of course, those arches do need to be replaced, and I want to make it a little bit messier, even though it does look quite messy already, but just put some more crates on the floor and that and whatnot. Like, there should be some kind of big engine thing on that stud on the table, so I'll definitely try and include that. But I'm really happy with this overall, and hopefully you enjoyed it as well. If you like this week's update, like the video, that's what the like button's there for. Comment your favourite thing we did this week. For me, I think it's just the shaping of the room generally. I'm really happy with how it all turned out, and I really like it a lot. Especially that section with the droid. I think it looks really nice. And subscribe if you're new, so you can see me finish this room as well as finish the rest of the mock on Building Kamino. Thank you so much for watching, as always, and goodbye. And last up this week, we have, as always, our clone count, which is basically where every week, people who come along to my weekly Kamino live streams, there'll be a section where I say who wants a clone named after them in the mock series, and all you need to do is give me a name and an accessory, and they will be in that next week's episode of the build series. This week we have Nathaniel, Christopher Connolly, GM Productions, CD Productions, and this name, which I refuse to read out in its entirety. But yeah, that's essentially it. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye! Also, here's a clip of me in person to prove to YouTube that I am not a child, so please do not take away my live chat. I do not want this to happen for the 3rd week in a row. This is an awkward add-on to the end of the video, but don't take away my live chat, YouTube, please.